It was the last place I ever thought I'd feel abandoned. My son's house. I never expected to be sitting at that dinner table, surrounded by the smell of a homemade meal, feeling so alone. I was supposed to be welcomed here, loved, appreciated, but instead, I was fighting to keep my composure, to keep the smile from faltering on my face. Jason, my son, sat across from me, as absorbed in his phone as always. His fingers danced over the screen, completely unaware of the tension in the air. And Amanda, his wife, was playing the part of the doting daughter-in-law, serving me dish after dish like she was auditioning for a cooking show. But it wasn't her cooking that upset me. It was the hollow, rehearsed way she interacted with me. It was the way Jason barely looked up, his attention pulled away by his phone. But there was more. As I sat there, pushing my food around on my plate, trying to make small talk, something caught my ear. Amanda and her mother, Patricia, were talking. Their voices were low, but sharp enough to pierce the silence of the room. They didn't know I was standing just outside their living room door, getting ready to retreat for the night. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words I overheard hit me like a slap to the face. "She can't keep living on that measly pension forever," Amanda said with a laugh, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was laced with something cold, something sharp. "What happens when she gets sick? She'll need help, and we can't be her caretakers forever." I felt my stomach twist. I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't need someone to take care of me. But hearing her say those words, like I was already a burden, like I was just some inconvenience they would have to bear, it felt like a knife to the chest. Patricia's voice followed, smooth and condescending. "You know what you have to do, right? Get her to sign over the house. It's not like she's got much left to give." The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. I staggered backward, my hand resting against the doorframe to keep me steady. How could they talk about me like this? How could they reduce me to just an object? A thing to be shuffled around when it was convenient for them? I wasn't some piece of property to be sold off. I wasn't just a source of money for them to exploit. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to burst in there and demand they take it back, demand they see me for who I was. But I stayed frozen in place, my heart breaking in silence. I wasn't even a person to them anymore. I was a financial transaction, something to be manipulated and discarded when I was no longer useful. I stayed silent as I walked back to my room, the words echoing in my head. How long had they been thinking this? How long had they been plotting? It wasn't just Amanda, it was Jason too. He wasn't standing up for me, he wasn't defending me. He was sitting there, doing nothing, letting his wife and mother manipulate him. How could he, after everything I had done for him, after everything I had given? I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? They didn't see me as a mother anymore. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a bank account, a source of money that could be drained. I stayed for a few more days, but it was clear that things had changed. Every glance Amanda threw my way felt like a judgment, and Jason was distant, cold, like he was already planning the next step in their scheme. I knew then that I couldn't stay there any longer. They didn't want me. They didn't need me. They just wanted what I could give them. I packed my bags and left without a word. I couldn't bring myself to say goodbye. I couldn't bring myself to face Jason, to see the emptiness in his eyes. My son, the boy I raised, the one I had fought for, had turned his back on me. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing that I wasn't even part of their lives anymore. I was disposable, just another obstacle in their way. But that was the last time I would ever let them treat me like that. I found myself back at home, alone with my thoughts. The emptiness was overwhelming at first. The house felt too quiet, too still, but in that silence, something else started to creep in. Anger. Anger at what they had done to me, anger at how I had let them use me. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got the call. The doctor's voice was gentle, almost too gentle. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm afraid we've received your test results, and it's cancer." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Cancer. I had been through so much, fought so hard to make sure my family was happy, only to be handed this. It didn't feel real. I couldn't process it. For a moment, I was numb. I couldn't hear the doctor's voice anymore. My head was spinning, my body shaking. Why now? Why after everything? For the next few days, I stayed in a haze. I didn't leave my house. I didn't want to talk to anyone. My mind kept drifting back to what Amanda and Patricia had said, how they wanted to take everything from me, how they saw me as nothing but a burden. And now, cancer. It was like the universe was piling it all on top of me, one after the other. But then something shifted. I couldn't let them win. Not like this. Not with me in silence. Not with me fading away into nothingness. I wasn't going to let them have that satisfaction. I stood up, trembling, and went to the closet. I dusted off my old camera, the one I had abandoned years ago when life had gotten too hard. Photography had always been my passion, the one thing that made me feel alive. I had let it go, I had put it away, because I thought I had to focus on everything else, on my family, on them, but no more. I signed up for a photography class at the local community college, and it was like a light turned on inside me. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to find something, a purpose, a reason, and if I had to fight cancer, I was going to do it with everything I had. I wasn't going to let my life end with me being forgotten, with me being nothing. It was time to take back what was mine. It was time to fight. I don't know how long I stood there, my breath caught in my throat. The words that had just sliced through me hung in the air like a thick, suffocating fog. Every syllable they spoke dug deeper into my chest, cutting me open, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was like I was stuck in this moment, frozen in time, and all I could hear was Amanda's voice, sharp and calculated, followed by Patricia's sweet condescension. "Get her to sign over the house," Patricia had said, as if it was a simple transaction. "It's not like she's got much left to give." The air in the room seemed to grow colder, and I felt like I was shrinking, getting smaller and smaller. Was this really how they saw me? Just a thing to be used? A resource to be drained until there was nothing left? I could feel the weight of my own grief pressing down on me, but I couldn't let them see it. I couldn't let them win. Not like this. After what felt like an eternity, I forced my legs to move, slowly walking back into the living room, the sound of my footsteps echoing in my mind. I sat down across from them, forcing a smile onto my face, even though my heart was shattering inside. Their eyes were on me, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not now, not ever. I could feel their gaze, Amanda's fake sweetness, Patricia's disapproval, but all I could think about was the betrayal, the cruelty, the utter disregard for the woman who had spent her whole life giving, loving, sacrificing. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay there, pretending that everything was fine, but I had to. For now, I had to keep up the facade. Later that night, after the dinner had ended and the silence in the house grew heavier with every passing minute, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The words had been building up inside me, swirling like a storm, and I knew I had to confront Jason. I couldn't let him get away with this, not after everything I had done for him. I found him in the kitchen, rinsing his plate. His back was to me, and for a moment, I almost didn't say anything. I almost let it go, thinking that maybe it wasn't worth it, but I couldn't. "Jason," I said, my voice shaky. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I swallowed them down. "How could you let them talk about me like that? How could you just sit there while they planned to take everything from me?" My voice cracked as I spoke, the hurt spilling out in a way I couldn't control. My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest, but I wasn't going to back down. I had to make him see it. I had to make him understand how badly they had treated me, how much they had used me. Jason turned around slowly, his expression unreadable. "Mom, I don't know what to say." His voice was distant, his gaze avoiding mine. It was like he wasn't even there with me, like he was somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's better if you just let them help you. They're just trying to look out for you." I could feel the blood drain from my face. It was like someone had slapped me across the face. Help me? I had spent my entire life helping them, raising him, taking care of him, giving everything I had. And now he was standing there, telling me that I should let them help me, let them take what little I had left. It hit me like a freight train. In that moment, I realized Jason wasn't just siding with them. He wasn't just being passive. No, Jason had already been swayed by their cruelty. He had already bought into their lies. He was complicit in this betrayal. My own son had been manipulated into believing that I was the problem, that I was the burden. I took a step back, feeling like the ground had just been ripped out from beneath me. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my throat dry, and I could barely hear the words I was speaking. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What happened to the boy I raised? The boy who knew right from wrong? The boy who would never let anyone talk about me like that? Jason didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his eyes averted, his jaw clenched. He didn't even look like my son anymore. He looked like someone else. Someone I didn't know. "I don't know, Mom," he muttered, his words barely audible. I just don't know." I stared at him, my heart shattering all over again. This wasn't the son I had raised. This wasn't the boy who had once called me Mom with love in his eyes. This was someone else, someone who had been swallowed by their selfishness, someone who no longer cared about the woman who had spent her life supporting him. I turned away, my hands shaking as I reached for the door. I couldn't stand there anymore. I couldn't be in that house, surrounded by people who had turned their backs on me. The pain was too much. "I can't do this, Jason," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't be here. Not with you, not with them. I've spent my whole life giving, and I'm done. I can't keep fighting for people who don't see me." I walked out of the room without another word, the weight of everything crashing down on me as I made my way to the door. For the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly alone. My son had chosen them over me. He had chosen their lies, their manipulation, their cruelty, and I couldn't change that. As I stood on the front step, the door closing softly behind me, I felt my heart shatter. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that I had lost him. The son I had loved with all my heart, the son I had fought for, was gone. And in his place stood a stranger. I could feel the tears welling up again, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I had been crying for so long, I wasn't sure I had anything left to give, but something inside me, deep down, told me that this wasn't the end. This wasn't the way my story was going to end. This was just another chapter. And the next one? That was mine to write. And so I walked away. Not just from Jason, not just from Amanda and Patricia, but from the person I had been for so long. I was walking away from all of it, because I had no choice. I had to find myself again. I had to take back my life. And as I walked down the street, alone, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I left their house that night. I didn't want to see their faces again, hear their hollow apologies, or feel the weight of their indifference. I walked out without a word, dragging my suitcase behind me, the wheels squeaking against the sidewalk, echoing in the stillness of the night. The cold air hit me like a slap as I stepped into the street, but it didn't matter. My heart was already numb. I felt both empty and free, like a weight had been lifted off me, but with it came a sense of desolation, a sense that I was leaving behind more than just their house. I had to leave. I had to walk away from them, from Jason, from Amanda, from their betrayal. But that freedom was fleeting. It didn't take long before I sank into a darkness that I couldn't escape. For months, I barely left the house. I barely spoke to anyone. Every day felt like a battle just to get out of bed. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but so was the grief. They had taken so much from me. They had stolen the one thing that should have been sacred, my family. And now, they had taken my dignity. I spent those months staring out the window, letting the days slip by, consumed by the weight of everything that had happened. How could Jason have turned on me like that? How could Amanda have been so cruel? The hurt never stopped, and the sadness never faded. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got the phone call. The doctor's voice was gentle, almost too gentle, like he was trying to soften the blow. "Mrs. Hayes, we've received your test results and it's cancer." The words fell into the silence like a bomb, and for a moment I didn't know what to do with them. Cancer. The word sounded foreign in my ears. It didn't seem real. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening to me, not after everything I'd already been through. For a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I had already lost so much, my family, my sense of self, and now I was losing my health too. How could I possibly face this? How could I possibly face anything when the world had already come crashing down on me? But then something shifted inside me. Instead of sinking into despair, instead of letting this diagnosis define me, I decided something. I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself as the realization hit me. If I was going to go down, I was going down swinging. No more hiding, no more being invisible. Not like this, not with cancer trying to take me down, and certainly not with the shadows of my family's betrayal hanging over me. I wasn't going to let them have the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I couldn't. I thought of all the years I had spent trying to please them, trying to make everyone else happy, sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. And now when I was at my lowest, I was supposed to give up. No, I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this, not while I still had some fight left in me. I dusted off my old camera, the one I had abandoned years ago when life had gotten in the way, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than the crushing weight of the world. I felt a spark of life. Photography had always been my passion, my escape from the world around me. But I had let it slip away, thinking that my family needed me more, that everything else should come second, not anymore. I signed up for a photography class at the local community college. It felt like a small step, but it was a step. It was me taking control. It was me saying, "No, I will not let this cancer define me. I will find something to hold on to. I will find something worth living for." The first few days of class were a blur. I felt out of place, like an outsider in a room full of strangers. But as the days went on, something began to change. I started looking at the world through a different lens, literally. I saw the beauty in things I had never noticed before. The way the light fell on the trees outside the classroom window, the way the shadows danced across the streets when the sun was setting. I began to see life again, and I remembered why I had loved photography in the first place. It wasn't about the recognition. It wasn't about the money. It was about seeing the world in a way that no one else did, capturing moments that would otherwise be lost. I threw myself into it. Every moment I wasn't in class, I was out with my camera, shooting anything and everything that caught my eye. I'd wander through the streets, snapping pictures of people I didn't know, of buildings that had stories to tell, of the little things that people often overlooked. I wanted to capture it all. I wanted to live again. And then, something incredible happened. My work started getting noticed. At first, it was just local exhibitions, small shows in community centers and art galleries. But soon, people were asking to buy my prints. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me feel like I was doing something worthwhile again. It was enough to make me feel like I had a purpose. One afternoon, as I sat in a coffee shop going over my latest batch of photos, I received an email. It was from a curator at an art gallery in New York, asking if I'd be interested in having my work featured in their upcoming exhibition. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the break I had been waiting for. I didn't know if it was the cancer or just the weight of everything that had happened, but I felt a rush of emotions in that moment. Pride, excitement, fear, disbelief. But more than anything, I felt alive. I had finally found something that was mine, something that no one could take away from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life again. This was my fight, my journey, and nothing, no diagnosis, no betrayal, could take that away from me. It didn't take long for me to find my rhythm again. The camera, once abandoned, became my lifeline. I poured everything I had into my photography, embracing each shot like it was my chance to prove I was still here, still capable, still alive. I captured sunsets, streets, faces, moments in time that, for so long, I had let slip away. I began to see the world with a fresh perspective. The lens didn't just show me what was in front of me, it revealed what had always been hidden. Soon enough, I was winning awards. My work was being recognized, my name printed in the local papers. I could hardly believe it. It was like a dream, but this dream was real. I was selling prints, and each sale, each little achievement, meant something more than money. It meant respect. People were finally seeing me. I wasn't just some old woman sitting in a corner, waiting for the world to forget me. I was creating something. I was someone again. But, as always, just when things were looking up, the shadow of my past loomed large. Jason and Amanda were still trying to control me, still trying to pull me back into their web. They had seen my success, and they were desperate. I could feel it, in every subtle glance, every message they sent. I had started to bloom, and they couldn't stand it. One night, while I was recovering from treatment, weak, drained, but still standing, my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. "Charlotte, honey," her voice cooed through the speaker, too sweet, too rehearsed. "We've been looking at houses. You know, the market's been crazy, and we're a little short on the down payment. Maybe you could help us out." Her words were dripping with faux sweetness, like she was buttering me up for something. I felt my blood boil, my grip tightening on the phone. It was the same manipulation I'd heard 1,000 times before. They didn't want me in their lives. They wanted what I could give them, and I wasn't about to fall for it again. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady, calm. "No, Amanda," I said, the words coming out clear and firm. "I'm not helping you. Not now, not ever." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could feel her shock, feel her trying to recalculate, trying to figure out her next move. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I've worked too hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to give it to people who only see me as a wallet, I added, my voice unwavering. "You and Jason can figure it out yourselves." I hung up the phone, my heart still racing, but my resolve strengthening. For so long I had been their safety net. For so long I had let them take from me, let them use me. But no more. I wasn't going to be anyone's fallback plan. Not anymore. It was hard, so much harder than I ever imagined. Even as I stood my ground, part of me felt like I was betraying my own son. Jason, he was still the boy I raised, but he wasn't that boy anymore, was he? He had chosen Amanda's side. He had chosen her manipulation, her coldness. He had turned his back on me, and I couldn't change that. Still, the part of me that had been pushed aside, the part of me that had been ignored for so long, was finally speaking up. It had been buried under layers of guilt, under years of self-sacrifice, but it was there. It was alive. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to tell me I was worth something. My worth wasn't tied to their opinion of me. It wasn't tied to their approval. It was mine, and I was finally taking it back. As the weeks passed, I threw myself even further into my photography. The world outside seemed to shrink, my focus narrowing onto the beauty I was capturing. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I still had my health battles, still had moments of doubt and fear, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. Then, another message from Amanda came. It was like she couldn't help herself. "Charlotte," she wrote, the words casual, too casual. "We were really hoping you might reconsider helping us with the house. We've got everything ready to go. You know how much we've done for you." The manipulation had become transparent. This wasn't about a house. This was about power, control, and I refused to give them that power over me. I didn't reply. Days later, I was sitting in my studio, reviewing the details for an upcoming exhibition. A feeling of pride settled over me as I scanned the photos that would soon be on display. This was my work. This was mine. It wasn't handed to me. It wasn't bought with guilt or manipulation. It was earned. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Jason. I opened the door slowly, unsure of what to expect. His face was pale, his eyes tired. For a moment, we just stood there, neither of us speaking. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with years of resentment and longing. I had no idea why he was here, but I was sure it wasn't just a visit. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly, his voice almost apologetic. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The last time we'd spoken, I had felt betrayed, but now there was a weariness in his eyes that made my heart ache. He wasn't the same person I had raised, but he was still my son. "Mum," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I know I've messed up. I know I've let you down." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how much his betrayal had cut me, but another part of me wanted to believe that he could still see me, that he could still come back. "You don't have to say anything," I finally said, my voice low, "but I need you to understand something. I'm not going to be your safety net anymore. I'm not here to fix your problems. I'm here to live my own life. And if you can't accept that, then I can't help you." Jason looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the past, before everything had gone wrong. But then, he nodded, his gaze firming. "I get it," he said. "I've been selfish, and I've taken you for granted. But I'm trying, Mum. I really am." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to hope that this was the beginning of something new, something different. But I couldn't be sure. "I hope you figure it out, Jason," I said softly. "But you need to do it for yourself, not for me." And with that, he left. I closed the door behind him, standing there for a long moment, listening to the silence that followed. The silence was different now. It wasn't full of regret or sorrow. It was full of potential, of possibility. I wasn't sure where Jason's path would lead or where mine would go from here. But for the first time in a long time, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally living for myself, and that was enough. The phone rang again, breaking the silence. It was Amanda, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something inside me shifted, and I answered. "Charlotte," she began, her voice sugar-sweet, "I really think you should reconsider helping us. We could do so much with that money. It's not just for us, it's for you too." I felt my blood boil once more. "No, Amanda," I said, my voice steady. "You and Jason don't get to keep taking from me. I'm done being your backup plan." There was a long pause on the other end. "You'll regret this, Charlotte," she said, her voice cold now. "You'll see." I hung up without another word. I wasn't scared of her threats anymore. I wasn't scared of them. And that was the final realization. I was done being afraid. One day, after finding out Amanda had hired a private investigator to dig into my finances, I made a decision. It was a calm resolve, one that came in the dead of night when I had enough space to think clearly, away from their constant manipulation. The moment the realization hit me that they were trying to track every penny, it became crystal clear. I could no longer allow myself to be their pawn. I updated my will. Every penny I had earned would go to a charity I believed in, and not a dime would go to them. They wanted to treat me like a burden. Fine. If they saw me as something to exploit, I'd give everything I had to people who appreciated what I had to offer. People who saw me as more than a bank account to raid. That was the ultimate decision. It wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about being in control of my life and my legacy. For too long, I had let them make me feel small. Too long had I let Jason and Amanda dictate my worth. No more. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. The day of my art exhibit arrived, and I couldn't have been prouder. It wasn't just about the photos. It was about what they represented, my struggle, my survival, my freedom. Every frame told the story of reclaiming my life, of finding peace after years of being ignored and underestimated. I had earned this moment. I had worked for it, fought for it. This was my second chance. The gallery was filled with guests, their voices blending into an indistinct hum as people admired my work. I stood at the back, my hands nervously gripping a glass of wine, watching as the crowd interacted with my photos. Some were taking pictures, others were reading the descriptions I'd written, and a few people even came up to compliment me. It was everything I had dreamed of. Then, just as I was allowing myself to believe everything was finally coming together, I saw Amanda. She stormed into the gallery with a look on her face I knew all too well, that look. Her eyes were wild, frantic, like she had just made a discovery she couldn't wait to share. But what she said next, it hit me like a punch to the gut. "You've got some nerve," she spat, her voice shrill, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. "How dare you spend money on this nonsense? You're wasting it on photography when you should be using it to pay for your treatment." The words struck like lightning. I felt my heart lurch, my body stiffening, as the crowd's murmur grew louder. But Amanda wasn't done. She went on, her face flushed with anger, her voice trembling with indignation. "You've been stealing money for cancer treatment and blowing it all on this ridiculous hobby of yours," she accused, pointing to one of the photos hanging on the wall, her fingers shaking with fury. "And what do you expect from us? We're your family, for God's sake." I could feel my cheeks burning, the blood rushing to my head. But I stood there, frozen. My stomach twisted into knots, and for a moment all I could do was stare at her. This was it, the moment I had been dreading, the confrontation, the shame. This was the final act in their attempt to break me. But then, as I prepared for the flood of humiliation to take over, something unexpected happened. Jason stood up. He had been standing quietly near the entrance, blending into the background like he usually did. But now, as the words hung in the air, he stepped forward. His eyes were wide with emotion, his face drawn tight in a way I had never seen before. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was something more than indifference in his gaze. He didn't hesitate. "Enough," he said, his voice firm, cutting through Amanda's tirade like a hot knife through butter. The room fell silent, every eye turning to him, unsure of what was coming next. "This is ridiculous. I'm done." I blinked, unable to process his words at first. Done? Done with what? Was he finally seeing it? Was he finally seeing me? But then he turned to Amanda, his face contorted with raw emotion. "We're done," he said, his voice louder now, shaking with intensity. "I can't live like this anymore." For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The reality of what I was hearing didn't sink in. Jason, my son, the man who had stood by silently while Amanda manipulated me, while Patricia used me. Now he was standing up to her. "Jason, what are you saying?" Amanda demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. "You can't do this. This is your mother." Jason didn't flinch. He didn't back down. His eyes remained locked on her, his expression now one of utter determination. "I'm saying enough," he replied. "I've been blind, but not anymore. I see what you're doing, and I can't keep supporting it." The room was still, not a sound. Everyone was waiting for Amanda's next move, for the explosion of anger that was sure to follow. But Amanda just stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing as if she didn't know what to say. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Jason turned away from Amanda, looking at me for the first time that night with something new in his eyes. Regret. I couldn't tell if it was too little too late, but in that moment, I realized something important. He had made a choice, and he had chosen me. It wasn't perfect. I didn't expect it to be. This wasn't a fairy tale where everything magically fixes itself, where all the years of manipulation and betrayal evaporate in an instant. But it was a start. For the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't invisible, like I mattered, and that was enough for me. Amanda, on the other hand, stood there, her face pale and her mouth tight with fury. But I wasn't worried about her. Not anymore. She had lost her power. She could scream, she could argue, she could accuse me of anything, but she could no longer manipulate my life. I had taken that power back, and with that, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known I needed. The room was still tense, but the air had shifted. People were watching, waiting for the fallout. But I wasn't going to be the one to create it. I had already made my decision. I was no longer the victim. I walked away from the scene, my head held high. The path ahead of me was uncertain, but I was done being afraid of it. As I left the gallery, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe I didn't have all the answers. But I was no longer hiding. I was living again. And that, finally, was enough. The room went deathly silent. Amanda's face went from red with anger to white with shock, and her jaw dropped. Jason's betrayal was complete. He chose to walk away from her, to finally see the truth about his wife. The silence was suffocating, the kind of silence that fills a room with so much tension, it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. Everyone in that gallery was staring, waiting for Amanda's reaction, but she was frozen, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. She had just lost everything: her control, her power, her grip over Jason. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw Jason's true self, clear, raw, and unshaken. I watched him, his face flushed with emotion, his hands trembling at his sides. He looked nothing like the man who had stood by her side all these years. Now he was standing up for me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Peace. Justice had been done. The truth was out in the open. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. No amount of money or manipulation could change that, not anymore. I felt the weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long start to lift. The years of betrayal, the manipulation, the cold indifference from my own son, all of it started to fade in that moment. Jason had chosen me. The boy I raised, the boy who had turned his back on me, was standing by me now. The satisfaction of watching Amanda's shocked expression was sweet, but the peace I felt inside was sweeter. She had no control anymore. She had no leverage over me, over my life. And that, more than anything, felt like a victory. I took a deep breath, feeling the rush of freedom fill my chest. My legs felt weak, but my heart felt strong. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I could breathe freely, like I was in control of my own destiny. Without a word to anyone, I turned on my heel and walked out of the gallery. The silence behind me was deafening, but the buzz in my ears felt like the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I had done it. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me again. I stepped out into the cool night air, the city's lights flickering like distant stars. My heart was pounding in my chest, but this time, it was from something other than fear. It was from exhilaration, from the rush of reclaiming my life, my power. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I didn't need to live for their expectations. For once, I was living for me. As I walked through the streets, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the kind of weight that had been there for so long, I hadn't even realized it was crushing me. But now, I was free. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a pawn in their game. I was me, and that was all I needed. A few months passed, and life started to settle into a new rhythm. I kept working on my photography, of course, preparing for an exhibition in New York, something I never would have even dared to dream about a year ago. But now it was my reality. The work was mine. The gallery space was mine. And I had earned it. Every shot, every print, every sale. I had done it all on my own, without anyone's help or approval. I spent my days in my favorite coffee shop, the one with the worn leather chairs and the smell of roasted beans in the air, going through the latest batch of photos I had taken. I sipped my coffee, staring at the prints laid out in front of me, making mental notes for what I would tweak for the show in New York. This was my life now. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but it was mine. And then, just as I was lost in my thoughts, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, already knowing who it was. It was Jason. "I'm sorry, Mom," the message read. "I was wrong. I'll always love you." I sat there, staring at the text for a long time. The words hit me harder than I expected. The floodgates opened, and I felt the rush of emotions: hurt, confusion, anger, and finally, relief. This was the moment I had been waiting for, right? The apology I had longed to hear. But as I read the message again, I realized something. It wasn't the apology that I needed to heal. It was the truth I had found in myself. I wasn't sure what came next for me and Jason. I wasn't sure if we could go back to how things were, or if we'd ever find our way back to each other. I didn't know if I even wanted that. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to be everything for everyone. But for the first time, I was no longer chasing after what didn't want to be found. I set my phone down on the table, the message still visible on the screen. Maybe one day, Jason and I would rebuild our relationship. Maybe one day, we'd have that conversation I'd been holding out for. But for now, I wasn't going to chase after him. The road to healing was mine to walk alone. I took another sip of coffee, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle over me. This was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter where I was no longer chasing after approval, no longer begging for love from people who had never understood what I had given. And that, in itself, was enough. Maybe I wouldn't rebuild my relationship with Jason overnight, or even in a year. Maybe we'd never find our way back to what we once were, but for the first time in years, I was finally living for myself. And that I knew was the most important thing of all. That's all that mattered.